Chapter 128. Shantiniketan. From Rajkot I proceeded to Shantiniketan. The teachers and students overwhelmed me with affection. The reception was a beautiful combination of simplicity, art and love. It was here I met Kakasaheb Kalelkar for the first time. I did not know then why Kalelkar was called Kakasaheb. But I learnt later on that Sjt Keshvarov Deshpande, who was a contemporary and a close friend of mine in England and who had conducted a school in the Baroda state called Ganganath Vidyalaya, had given the teachers family names with a view to investing the Vidyalaya with a family atmosphere. Sjt Kalelkar, who was a teacher there, came to be called Kaka lit paternal uncle. Fatka was called Mama lit maternal uncle, and Harihar Sharma received the name Anna lit brother. Others also got similar names. Anandanand Swami as Kaka's friend and Patwarden Appa as Mama's friend later joined the family, and all in course of time became my co-workers one after another. Sjt Deshpande himself used to be called Saheb. When the Vidyalaya had to be dissolved, the family also broke up, but they never gave up their spiritual relationship or their assumed names. Kaka Saheb went out to gain experience of different institutions, and at the time I went to Shantiniketan, he happened to be there. Chintaman Shastri, belonging to the same fraternity, was there also. Both helped in teaching Sanskrit. The Phoenix family had been assigned separate quarters at Shantiniketan. Mahatma Gandhi was at their head, and he had made it his business to see that all the rules of the Phoenix ashram should be scrupulously observed. I saw that, by din his fragrance felt in the whole of Shantiniketan. Andrews was there, and also Pearson. Amongst the Bengali teachers with whom we came in fairly close contact were Jagadanand Babu, Nepal Babu, Santosh Babu, Chidamohan Babu, Najam Babu, Sharad Babu and Kala Babu. As is my wont, I quickly mixed with the teachers and students and engaged them in a discussion on self-help. I put it to the teachers that, if they and the boys dispensed with the services of paid cooks and cooked their food themselves, it would enable the teachers to control the kitchen from the point of view of the boys' physical and moral health, and it would afford to the students an object lesson in self-help. One or two of them were inclined to shake their heads. Some of them strongly approved of the proposal. The boys welcomed it, if only because of their instinctive taste for novelty. So we launched the experiment. When I invited the poet to express his opinion, he said that he did not mind it provided the teachers were favorable. To the boys he said the experiment contains the key to Swaraj. Pearson began to wear away his body in making the experiment a success. He threw himself into it with zest. A batch was formed to cut vegetables, another to clean the grain, and so on. Najan Babu and others undertook to see to the sanitary cleaning of the kitchen and its surroundings. It was a delight to me to see them working spade in hand. But it was too much to expect the 125 boys with their teachers to take to this work of physical labor like ducks to water. There used to be daily discussion. Some began early to show fatigue. But Pearson was not the man to be tired. One would always find him with his smiling face doing something or other in or about the kitchen. He had taken upon himself the cleaning of the bigger utensils. A party of students played on their sitar before this cleaning party. In order to beguile the tedium of the operation, all alike took the thing up with zest, and Shantiniketan became a busy hive. Changes like these, when once begun, always develop. Not only was the Phoenix party's kitchen self-conducted, but the food cooked in it was of the simplest. Condiments were eschewed. Rice, dal, vegetables and even wheat flour were all cooked at one and the same time in a kitchen with a view to introducing reform in the Bengali kitchen. One or two teachers and some students ran this kitchen. The experiment was, however, dropped after some time. I am opinion that the famous institution Lost nothing by having conducted the experiment for a brief interval, and some of the experiences gained could not but be of help to the teachers. I had intended to stay at Shantiniketan for some time, but fate willed otherwise. I had hardly been there a week when I received from Pune a telegram announcing Gokhale's death. Shantiniketan was immersed in grief. All the members came over to me to express their condolences. A special meeting was called in the ashram temple to mourn the national loss. It was a solemn function. The same day I left for Pune with my wife and Maganlal. All the rest stayed at Shantiniketan. Andrews accompanied me up to Burdwan. Do you think, he asked me, that a time will come for Satyagraha in India? And if so, have you any idea when it will come? It is difficult to say, said I, for 1 year I am to do nothing. For Gokhale took from me a promise that I should travel in India for gaining experience and express no opinion on public question until I have finished the period of probation. Even after the year is over, I will be in no hurry to speak and pronounce opinions. And so I do not suppose there will be any occasion for Satyagraha for 5 years or so. I may note in this connection that Gokhale used to laugh at some of my ideas in Hind Swaraj or Indian Home Rule and say, after you have stayed a year in India, your views will correct themselves. Chapter 129. Woes of third-class passengers. At Burdwan we came face to face with the hardships that a third-class passenger has to go through even in securing his ticket. Third-class tickets are not booked so early, we were told. I went to the station master, though that too was a difficult business. Someone kindly directed me to where he was, and I represented to him our difficulty. He also made the same reply. As soon as the booking window opened, I went to purchase the tickets. But it was no easy thing to get them. Might was right, and passengers, who were forward and indifferent to others, coming one after another, continued to push me out. I was therefore about the last of the first crowd to get a ticket. The train arrived, and getting into it was another trial. There was a free exchange of abuse and pushes between passengers already in the train and those trying to get in. We ran up and down the platform, but were everywhere met with the same reply, no room here. I went to the guard. He said, you must try to get in where you can or take the next train. But I have urgent business, I respectfully replied. He had no time to listen to me. I was disconcerted. I told Maganlal to get in wherever possible, and I got into an interclass compartment with my wife. The guard saw us getting in. At a Sansal station he came to charge us excess fares. I said to him, it was your duty to find us room. We could not get any, and so we are sitting here. If you can accommodate us in a third-class compartment, we shall be only too glad to go there. You may not argue with me, said the guard. I cannot accommodate you. You must pay the excess fare or get out. I wanted to reach Pune somehow. I was not therefore prepared to fight the guard. So I paid the excess fare he demanded, i.e. up to Pune. But I resented the injustice. In the morning we reached Mogalsarai. Maganlal had managed to get a seat in the third class too, which I now and asked him to give me a certificate to the effect that I had shifted to a third class compartment at Mogalsarai. This he declined to do. I applied to the railway authorities for redress and got a reply to this effect. It is not our practice to refund excess fares without the production of a certificate, but we make an exception in your case. It is not possible, however, to refund the excess fare from Burdwan to Mogalsarai. Since this I have had experiences of third-class traveling which, if I wrote them all down, would easily fill a volume. But I can only touch on them causally in these chapters. It has been and always will be my profound regret that physical incapacity should have compelled me to give up third-class traveling. The woes of third-class passengers are undoubtedly due to the high-handedness of railway authorities. but the rudeness, dirty habits, selfishness and ignorance of the passengers themselves are no less to blame. The pity is that they often do not realize that they are behaving ill, dirtily or selfishly. They believe that everything they do is in the natural way. All this may be traced to the indifference towards them of us educated people. We reached Koyon Dead Tried Maganlale and I got some water from the station water pipe and had our bath. As I was proceeding to arrange for my wife's bath, SJT call of the servants of India Society recognizing us came up. He too was going to Pune. He offered to take my wife to the second-class bathroom. I hesitated to accept the courteous offer. I knew that my wife had no right to avail herself of the second-class bathroom, but I ultimately connived at the impropriety. This, I know, does not become a votary of truth. Not that my wife was eager to use the bathroom, but a husband's partiality for his wife got the better of his partiality for truth. The face of truth is hidden behind the golden veil of Maya says the Upanishad. Chapter 130. Wooing. On arrival in Pune, we found ourselves, after the performance of the Shraddha ceremonies, discussing the future of the society and the question as to whether I should join it or not. This question of membership proved a very delicate matter for me to handle. List Gokhale was there. I did not have to seek admission as a member. I had simply to obey his wish, a position I loved to be in. Launching on the stormy sea of Indian public life, I was in need of a sure pilot. I had one in Gokhale and had felt secure in his keeping. Now that he was gone, I was thrown on my own resources, and I felt that it was my duty to seek admission. That, I thought, would please Gokhale's spirit. So, without hesitation and with firmness, I began the wooing. Most of the members of the society were in Pune at this juncture. I set about pleading with them and tried to dispel their fears about me. But I saw that they were divided. One section favored my admission, the other was strongly against it. I knew that neither yielded to the other in its affection for me, but possibly their loyalty to the society was greater, at any rate not less than their love for me. All our discussions were therefore free from bitterness and strictly confined to matters of principle. The section that was opposed to me held that they and I were as the poles asunder in various vital matters, and they felt my membership was likely to imperil the very objects for which the society was founded. This naturally was more than they could bear. We dispersed after prolonged discussions, the final decision being postponed to a later date. I was considerably agitated as I returned home. Was it right for me to be admitted by a majority vote? Would it be consonant with my loyalty to Gokhale? I saw clearly that, when there was such a sharp division amongst the members of the society over admitting me, by far the best course for me was to withdraw my application for admission and save those opposed to me from a delicate situation. Therein I thought lay my loyalty to the society and Gokhale. The decision came to me in a flash, and immediately I wrote to Mr. Shastri asking him not to have the adjourned meeting at all. Those who had opposed my application fully appreciated the decision. It saved them from an awkward position and bound us in closer bonds of friendship. The withdrawal of my application made me truly a member of the society. Experience now tell me that it was well that I did not formally become a member, and that the opposition of those who had been against me was justified. Experience has shown too that our views on matters of principle were widely divergent. But the recognition of the differences has meant to estrangement or bitterness between us. We have remained as brothers, and the society's Pune home has always been for me a place of pilgrimage. It is true that I did not officially become a member of the society, but I have ever been a member in spirit. Spiritual relationship is far more precious than physical relationship divorced from. Spiritual is body without soul. Chapter 131. Kumbh Mela. I next went to Rangoon to meet Dr. Mehta, and on my way I halted at Calcutta. I was the guest of the late Babu Bhupendranath Basu. Bengali hospitality reached its climax here. In those days I was a strict fruitarian, so all the fruits and nuts available in Calcutta were ordered for me. The ladies of the house kept awake all night skinning various nuts. Every possible care was taken in dressing fresh fruit in the Indian style. Numerous delicacies were prepared for my companions, amongst whom was my son Ramdas. Much as I could appreciate this affectionate hospitality, I could not bear the thought of a whole household being occupied in entertaining 2 or 3 guests. But as yet I saw no escape from such embarrassing attentions. On the boat going to Rangoon I was a deck passenger. If excess of attention embarrassed us in SJT, boss's house, grossest inattention, even to the elementary comforts of deck passengers, was our lot on the boat. What was an apology for a bathroom was unbearably dirty, the latrines were stinking sinks. To use the latrine one had to wade through urine and excreta or jump over them. This was more than flesh and blood could bear. I approached the chief officer without avail. If anything was lacking to complete the picture of stink and filth, the passengers furnished it by their thoughtless habits. They spat where they sat, dirted the surroundings with the leavings of their food, tobacco and betel leaves. There was no end to the noise, and everyone tried to monopolize as much room as possible. Their luggage took up more room than they. We had thus 2 days of the severest trial. On reaching Rangoon I wrote to the agent of the steamship company, acquainting him with all the facts. Thanks to this letter and to Dr. Mehta's efforts in the matter, the return journey though on deck was less unbearable. In Rangoon my fruitarian diet was again a source of additional trouble to the host. But since Dr. Mehta's home was as good as my own, I could control somewhat the lavishness of the menu. However, as I had not set any limit to the number of articles I might eat, the palate and the eyes refused to put an effective check on the supply of varieties ordered. There were no regular hours for meals. Personally, I preferred having the last meal before nightfall. Nevertheless, as a rule it could not be had before 8 or 9. This year 1915 was the year of the Kumbh Fair, which is held at Hardwar once every 12 years. I was by no means eager to attend the fair, but I was anxious to meet Mahatma Gandhi, who was in his Gurukul. Gokhale Society had sent a big volunteer corps for service at the Kumbh. Pundit Hridayanath Kunzru was at the head, and the late Dr. Dev was the medical officer. I was invited to send the Phoenix party to assist them, and so Mahatma Gandhi had already preceded me. On my return from Rangoon, I joined the band. The journey from Calcutta to Hardwar was particularly trying. Sometimes the compartments had no lights. From Saharanpur we were huddled into carriages for goods or cattle. These had no roofs, and what with the blazing midday sun overhead and the scorching iron floor beneath, we were all but roasted. The pangs of thirst, caused by even such a journey as this, could not persuade Orthodox Hindus to take water, if it was Musalmani. They waited until they could get the Hindu water. These very Hindus, let it be noted, do not so much as hesitate or inquire when during illness the doctor administers them wine or prescribes beef tea, or a Musalman or Christian compounder gives them water. Our stay in Shantiniketan had taught us that the scavenger's work would be our special function in India. Now for the volunteers in Hardwar tents had been pitched in a #Dharmashla and Dr. Dev had dug some pits to be used as latrines. He had to depend on paid scavengers for looking after these. Here was work for the Phoenix party. We offered to cover up the excreta with earth and to see to their disposal, and Dr. Dev gladly accepted our offer. The offer was naturally made by me, but it was Mahatma Gandhi who had to execute it. My business was mostly to keep sitting in the tent giving #Darshan and holding religious and other discussions with numerous pilgrims who called on me. This left me not a minute which I could call my own. I was followed even to the Bathing hashtag got hashtag by these hashtag darshan seekers hashtag, nor did they leave me alone whilst I was having my meals. Thus it was in Hardwar that I realized what a deep impression my humble services in South Africa had made throughout the whole of India. But this was no enviable position to be in. I felt as though I was between the devil and the deep sea, where no one recognized me. I had to put up with the hardships that fall to the lot of the millions in this land, e.g., in railway traveling, where I was surrounded by people who had heard of me. I was the victim of their craze for hashtag darshan hashtag. Which of the two conditions was more pitiable? I have often been at a loss to determine. That at least I know that the hashtag darshan vala's hashtag blind love has often made me angry and more often sore at heart. Whereas traveling, though often trying, has been uplifting and has hardly ever roused me to anger. I was in those days strong enough to roam about a lot and was fortunately not so known as not to be able to go in the streets without creating much fuss. During these roamings I came to observe more of the pilgrims' absent-mindedness, hypocrisy and slovenliness than of their piety. The swarm of sadhus who had descended there seemed to have been born but to enjoy the good things of life. Here I saw a cow with 5 feet. I was astonished, but knowing men soon disillusioned me. The poor 5-footed cow was a sacrifice to the greed of the wicked. I learned that the 5th foot was nothing else but a foot cut off from a live calf and grafted upon the shoulder of the cow. The result of this double cruelty was exploited to fleece the ignorant of their money. There was no Hindu but would be attracted by a 5-footed cow, and no Hindu but would lavish his charity on such a miraculous cow. The day of the fair was now upon us. It proved a red-letter day for me. I had not gone to Hardwar with the sentiments of a pilgrim. I have never thought of frequenting places of pilgrimage in search of piety. But the 17 lakhs of men that were reported to be there could not all be hypocrites or mere sightseers. I had no doubt that countless people amongst them had gone there to earn merit and for self-purification. It is difficult, if not impossible, to say to what extent this kind of faith uplifts the soul. I therefore passed the whole night immersed in deep thought. There were those pious souls in the midst of the hypocrisy that surrounded them. They would be free of guilt before their Maker. If the visit to Hardwar was in itself a sin, I must publicly protest against it and leave Hardwar on the day Kumbh. If the pilgrimage to Hardwar and to the Kumbh fair was not sinful, I must impose some act of self-denial on myself in atonement for the iniquity prevailing there and purify myself. This was quite natural for me. My life is based on disciplinary resolutions. I thought of the unnecessary trouble I had caused to my hosts at Calcutta and Rangoon, who had so lavishly entertained me. I therefore decided to limit the articles of my daily diet and to have my final meal before sunset. I was convinced that, if I did not impose these restrictions on myself, I should put my future hosts to considerable inconvenience and should engage them in serving me rather than engage myself in service. So I pledged myself never whilst in India to take more than 5 articles in 24 hours and never to eat after dark. I gave the fullest thought to the difficulties I might have to face, but I wanted to leave no loophole. I rehearsed to myself what would happen during an illness if I counted medicine among the 5 articles and made no exception in favor of special articles of diet. I finally decided that there should be no exception on any account whatsoever. I have been under these vows for now 13 years. They have subjected me to a severe test, but I am able to testify that they have also served as my shield. I am of opinion that they have added a few years to my life and saved me from many an illness. Chapter 132. Lakshmanjula. It was a positive relief to reach the Gurukul and meet Mahatma Gandhi with his giant frame. I at once felt the wonderful contrast between the peace of the Gurukul and the din and noise of Hardwar. The Mahatma overwhelmed me with affection. The Brahmacharis were all attention. It was here That I was first introduced to Acharya Ramadevji, and I could immediately see what a force and a power he must be. We had different viewpoints in several matters, nevertheless our acquaintance soon ripened into friendship. I had long discussions with Acharya Ramadevji and other professors about the necessity of introducing industrial training into the Gurukul. When the time came for going away, it was a wrench to leave the place. I had heard much in praise of the Lakshman Jula, a hanging bridge over the Ganges some distance from Hrishikesh, and many friends pressed me not to leave Hardwar without having gone as far as the bridge. I wanted to do this pilgrimage on foot, and so I did it in 2 stages. Many #sannyasis called on me at Hrishikesh. One of them was particularly attracted towards me. The Phoenix party was there, and their presence drew from the Swami many questions. We had discussions about religion, and he realized that I felt deeply about matters of religion. He saw me bareheaded and shirtless as I had returned from my bath in the Ganges. He was pained to miss the shikha, tuft of hair, on my head and the sacred thread about my neck, and said, "It pains me to see you, a believing Hindu, going without a sacred thread and the shikha. These are the 2 external symbols of Hinduism, and every Hindu ought to wear them." Now there is a history as to how I came to dispense with both. When I was an urchin of 10, I envied the Brahmin lads sporting bunches of keys tied to their sacred threads, and I wished I could do likewise. The practice of wearing the sacred thread was not then common among the Vaishya families in Kathiawad, but a movement had just been started for making it obligatory for the first 3 Varnas. As a result, several members of the Gandhi clan adopted the sacred thread. The Brahmin who was teaching 2 or 3 of us boys Ram Raksha invested us with the thread. And although I had no occasion to possess a bunch of keys, I got one and began to sport it. Later, when the thread gave way, I do not remember whether I missed it very much. But I know that I did not go in for a fresh one. As I grew up, several well-meaning attempts were made both in India and South Africa to reinvest me with the sacred thread, but with little success. If the Shudras may not wear it, I argued, what right have the other Varnas to do so? And I saw no adequate reason for adopting what was to me an unnecessary custom. I had no objection to the thread as such, but the reasons for wearing it were lacking. As a Vaishnava, I had naturally worn round my neck the kanthi, and the shikha was considered obligatory by letters. On the eve of my going to England, however, I got rid of the shikha lest when I was bareheaded it should expose me to ridicule and make me look, as I then thought, a barbarian in the eyes of the Englishman. In fact, this cowardly feeling carried me so far that in South Africa I got my cousin Shigamul Gandhi, who was religiously wearing the shikha, to do away with it. I feared that it might come in the way of his public work, and so, even at the risk of paining him, I made him get rid of it. I therefore made a clean breast of the whole matter to the Swami and said, "I will not wear the sacred thread, for I see no necessity for it, when countless Hindus can go without it and yet remain Hindus. Moreover, the sacred thread should be a symbol of spiritual regeneration, presupposing a deliberate attempt on the part of the wearer at a higher and purer life. I doubt whether in the present state of Hinduism and of India, Hindus can vindicate the right. Can come only after Hinduism has purged itself of untouchability, has removed all distinctions of superiority and inferiority, and shed a host of other evils and shams that have become rampant in it. My mind therefore rebels against the idea of wearing the sacred thread. But I am sure your suggestion about the #shikha is worth considering. I once used to have it, and I discarded it from a false sense of shame. And so I feel that I should start growing it again. I shall discuss the matter with my comrades. The Swami did not appreciate my position with regard to the sacred thread. The very reasons that seemed to me to point to not wearing it appeared to him to favor its wearing. Even today my position remains about the same as it was Hrishikesh. So long as there are different religions, every one of them may need some outward distinctive symbol. But when the symbol is made into A fetish and an instrument of proving the superiority of one's religion over others, it is fit only to be discarded. The sacred thread does not appear to me today to be a means of uplifting Hinduism. I am therefore indifferent to it. As for the shikha, cowardice having been the reason for discarding it after consultation with friends, I decided to regrow it. But to return to Lakshman Jhula, I was charmed with the natural scenery about Rishikesh and the Lakshman Jhula, and bowed my head in reverence to our ancestors for their sense of the beautiful in nature and for their foresight in investing beautiful manifestations of nature with a religious significance. But the way in which men were using these beauty spots was far from giving me peace. As at Hardwar, so at Rishikesh, people dirt the roads and the fair banks of the Ganges. They did not even hesitate to desecrate the sacred water of the Ganges. It filled me with agony to see people performing natural functions on the thoroughfares and river banks when they could easily have gone a little farther away from public haunts. Lakshman Jhula was, I saw, nothing but an iron suspension bridge over the Ganges. I was told that originally there had been a fine rope bridge, but a philanthropic Marwadi got it into his head to destroy the rope bridge and erect an iron one at a heavy cost, and then entrusted the keys to the government. I am at a loss to say anything about the rope bridge as I have never seen it, but the iron bridge is entirely out of place in such surroundings and mars their beauty. The making over of the keys of this pilgrim's bridge to government was too much even for my loyalty of those days. The Svargashram which one reaches after crossing the bridge was a wretched place, being nothing but a number of shabby-looking sheds of galvanized iron sheets. These, I was told, were made for Sadaka's aspirants. There were hardly any living there at the moment. Those who were in the main building gave one an unfavorable impression. But the Hardwar experiences proved for me to be of inestimable value. They helped me in no small way to decide where I was to live and what I was to do. Chapter 133. Founding of the Ashram. The pilgrimage to the Kumbh fair was my second visit to Hardwar. The Satyagraha Ashram was founded on the 25th of May 1915. Shardhananji wanted me to settle in Hardwar. Some of my Calcutta friends recommended Vaidyanathadam. Others strongly urged me to choose Rajkot. But when I happened to pass through Ahmedabad, many friends pressed me to settle down there, and they volunteered to find the expenses of the ashram as well as a house for us to live in. I had a predilection for Ahmedabad. Being a Gujarati, I thought I should be able to render the greatest service to the country through the Gujarati language. And then, as Ahmedabad was an ancient center of handloom weaving, it was likely to be the most favorable field for the revival of the cottage industry of hand spinning. There was also the hope that, the city being the capital of Gujarat, monetary help from its wealthy citizens would be more available here than elsewhere. The question of untouchability was naturally among the subjects discussed with the Ahmedabad friends. I made it clear to them that I should take the first opportunity of admitting an untouchable candidate to the ashram if he was otherwise worthy. "Where is the untouchable who satisfy your condition?" said a Vaishnava friend self-complacently. I finally decided to found the ashram at Ahmedabad. So far as accommodation was concerned, SJT, Javamal Desai, a barrister in Ahmedabad, was the principal man to help me. He offered to let, and we decided to hire, his Kakrab bungalow. The first thing we had to settle was the name of the ashram. I consulted friends. Amongst the names suggested were Savashram, the abode of service, Tapovan, the abode of austerities, etc. I liked the name Savashram, but for the absence of emphasis on the method of service. Tapovan seemed to be a pretentious title, because though tapas was dear to us, we would not presume to be tapasvins, men of austerity. Our creed was devotion to truth, and our business was the search for and insistence on truth. I wanted to acquaint India with the method I had tried in South Africa, and I desired to test in India the extent to which its application might be possible. So my companions and I selected the name Satyagraha Ashram as conveying both goal and our method of service. For the conduct of the ashram, a code of rules and observances was necessary. A draft was therefore prepared, and friends were invited to express their opinions on it. Amongst the many opinions that were received, that of Sir Gurudas Banerjee is still in my memory. He liked the rules, but suggested that humility should be added as one of the observances, as he believed that the younger generation sadly lacked humility. Though I noticed this fault, I feared humility would cease to be humility the moment it became a matter of vow. The true connotation of humility is self-effacement. Self-effacement is moksha, salvation, and whilst it cannot, by itself, be an observance, there may be other observances necessary for its attainment. If the acts of an aspirant after moksha or a servant have no humility or selflessness about them, there is no longing for moksha or service. Service without humility is selfishness and egotism. There were at this time about 13 Tamilians in our party. 5 Tamil youngsters had accompanied me from South Africa, and the rest came from different parts of the country. We were in all about 25 men and women. This is how the ashram started. All had their meals in a common kitchen and strove to live as one family. Chapter 134. On the Anvil. The ashram had been in existence only a few months when we were put to a test such as I had scarcely expected. I received a letter from Amritlal Thakur to this effect: a humble and honest, untouchable family is desirous of joining your ashram. Will you accept them? I was perturbed. I had never expected that an untouchable family with an introduction from no less a man than Thakur Bappa would so soon be seeking admission to the ashram. I shared the letter with my companions. They welcomed it. I wrote to Amritlal Thakur expressing our willingness to accept the family, provided all the members were ready to abide by the rules of the ashram. The family consisted of Dadabai, his wife Danaben, and their daughter Lakshmi, then a mere toddling babe. Dudabai had been a teacher in Bombay. They all argued to abide by the rules and were accepted. But their admission created a flutter amongst the friends who had been helping the ashram. The very first difficulty was found with regard to the use of the well, which was partly controlled by the owner of the bungalows. The man in charge of the water lift objected that drops of water from our bucket would pollute him. So he took to swearing at us and molesting Dudabai. I told everyone to put up with the abuse and continue drawing water at any cost. When he saw that we did not return his abuse, the man became ashamed and ceased to bother us. All monetary help, however, was stopped. The friend who had asked that question about an untouchable being able to follow the rules of the ashram had never expected that any such would be forthcoming. With the stopping of monetary help came rumors of proposed social boycott. We were prepared for all this. I had told my companions that, if we were boycotted and denied the usual faculties, we would not leave Ahmedabad. We would rather go and stay in the untouchables' quarter and live on whatever we could get by manual labor. Matters came to such a pass that Mahatma Gandhi one day gave me this notice: we are out of funds and there is nothing for the next month. I quietly replied, then we shall go to the untouchables' quarter. This was not the first time I had been faced with such a trial. On all such occasions God has sent help at the last moment. One morning, shortly after Maganlal had given me warning of our monetary plight, one of the children came and said that a Sheth who was waiting in a car outside wanted to see me. I went out to him. I want to give the ashram some help, said I, and I confess I am at the present moment at the end of my resources. I shall come tomorrow at this time, he said. Will you be here? Yes, said I, and he left. Next day, exactly at the appointed hour, the car drew up near our quarters and the horn was blown. The children came with the news. The chef did not come in. I went out to see him. He placed in my hands currency notes of the value of 13,000 rupees and drove away. I had never expected this help, and what a novel way of rendering it. The gentleman had never before visited the ashram. So far as I can remember, I had met him only once. No visit, no inquiries, simply rendering help and going away. This was a unique experience for me. The help deferred the exodus to the untouchables quarter. We now felt quite safe for a year. Just as there was a storm outside, so was there a storm in the ashram itself. Though in South Africa, untouchable friends used to come to my place and live and feed with me, my wife, and other women did not seem quite to relish the admission into the ashram of the untouchable friends. My eyes and ears easily detected their indifference, if not their dislike, towards Danaben. The monetary difficulty had caused me no anxiety, but this internal storm was more than I could bear. Danaben was an ordinary woman. Dudabai was a man with slight education but of good understanding. I liked his patience. Sometimes he did flare up, but on the whole I was well impressed with his forbearance. I pleaded with him to swallow minor insults. He not only agreed, but prevailed upon his wife to do likewise. The admission of this family proved a valuable lesson to the ashram. In the very beginning we proclaimed to the world that the ashram would not countenance untouchability. Those who wanted to help the ashram were thus put on their guard, and the work of the ashram in this direction was considerably simplified. The fact that it is mostly the real Orthodox Hindus who have met the daily growing expenses of the ashram is perhaps a clear indication that untouchability is shaken to its foundation. There are indeed many other proofs of this, but the fact that good Hindus do not scruple to help an ashram where we go the length of dining with the untouchables is no small proof. I am sorry that I should have to skip over quite a number of things pertaining to this subject. How we tackled delicate questions arising out of the main question, how we had to overcome some unexpected difficulties, and various other matters which are quite relevant to a description of experiments with truth. The chapters that follow will also suffer from the same drawback. I shall have to omit important details, because most of the characters in the drama are still alive, and it is not proper without permission to use their names in connection with events with which they are concerned. It is hardly practicable to obtain their consent or to get them every now and then to revise the chapters concerning themselves. Besides, such procedure is outside the limit of this autobiography. I therefore fear that the rest of the story, valuable as it in my opinion to seekers after truth, will be told with inevitable omissions. Nevertheless, it is my desire and hope, God willing, to bring this narrative down to the days of non-cooperation. Chapter 135. Abolition of Indentured Emigration. We shall, for a moment, take leave of the ashram, which in the very beginning had to weather internal and external storms, and briefly advert to a matter that engaged my attention. Indentured laborers were those who had emigrated from India to labor under an indenture for 5 years or less. Under the Smuts-Gandhi settlement of 1914, the £3 tax in respect of the indentured emigrants to Natal had been abolished, but the general emigration from India still needed treatment. In March 1916, Pundit Madan Mohan Malaviyaji moved a resolution in the Imperial Legislative Council for the abolition of the indenture system. In accepting the motion, Lord Hardinge announced that he had obtained from His Majesty's government the promise of the abolition in due course of the system. I felt, however, that India could not be satisfied with so very vague an assurance, but ought to agitate for immediate abolition. India had tolerated the system through her sheer negligence, and I believed the time had come when people could successfully agitate for this redress. I met some of the leaders, wrote in the press, and saw that public opinion was solidly in favor of immediate abolition. Might this be a fit subject for satyagraha? I had no doubt that it was, but I did not know the modus operandi. In the meantime, the Viceroy had made no secret of the meaning of the eventual abolition, which as he said, was abolition within such reasonable time as will allow of alternative arrangements. Introduced. So in February 1917, Pundit Malaviaji asked for leave to introduce a bill for the immediate abolition of the system. Lord Chelmsford refused permission. It was time for me to tour the country for an all-India agitation. Before I started the agitation, I thought it proper to wait upon the Viceroy. So I applied for an interview. He immediately granted it. Mr. Maffei, now Sir John Maffei, was his private secretary. I came in close contact with him. I had a satisfactory talk with Lord Chelmsford who, without being definite, promised to be helpful. I began my tour from Bombay. Mr. Jahangir Pati undertook to convene the meeting under the auspices of the Imperial Citizenship Association. The Executive Committee of the association met. First for framing the resolutions to be moved at the meeting. Dr. Stanley Reed, SJT, now Sir Lalabai Samaldas, SJT, Natrajan and Mr. Pati were present at the committee meeting. The discussion centered round the fixing of the period within which the government was to be asked to abolish the system. There were three proposals, viz. For abolition as soon as possible, abolition by the July 31st, and immediate abolition. I was for a definite date, as we could then decide what to do if the government failed to accede to our request within the time limit. SJT Lalabai. With the stopping of monetary help came rumors of proposed social boycott. We were prepared for all this. I had told my companions that, if we were boycotted and denied the usual faculties, we would not leave Ahmedabad. We would rather go and stay in the Untouchables' quarter and live on whatever we could get by manual labor. Matters came to such a pass that Mahatma Gandhi one day gave me this notice: we are out of funds and there is nothing for the next month. I quietly replied, then we shall go to the Untouchables' quarter. This was not the first time I had been faced with such a trial. On all such occasions God has sent help at the last moment. One morning, shortly after Maganlal had given me warning of our monetary plight, one of the children came and said that a Sheth who was waiting in a car outside wanted to see me. I went out to him. I want to give the ashram some help, said I, and I confess I am at the present moment at the end of my resources. I shall come tomorrow at this time, he said. Will you be here? Yes, said I, and he left. Next day, exactly at the appointed hour, the car drew up near our quarters, and the horn was blown. The children came with the news. The Sheth did not come in. I went out to see him. He placed in my hands currency notes of the value of 13,000 rupees and drove away. I had never expected this help, and what a novel way of rendering it. The gentleman had never before visited the ashram. So far as I can remember, I had met him only once. No visit, no inquiries, simply rendering help and going away. This was a unique experience for me. The help deferred the exodus to the Untouchables' quarter. We now felt quite safe for a year. Just as there was a storm outside, so was there a storm in the ashram itself. Though in South Africa, untouchable friends used to come to my place and live and feed with me, my wife and other women did not seem quite to relish the admission into the ashram of the untouchable friends. My eyes and ears easily detected their indifference, if not their dislike, towards Danaben. The monetary difficulty had caused me no anxiety, but this internal storm was more than I could bear. Danaben was an ordinary woman. Dudabai was a man with slight education but of good understanding. I liked his patience. Sometimes he did flare up, but on the whole I was well impressed with his forbearance. I pleaded with him to swallow minor insults. He not only agreed, but prevailed upon his wife to do likewise. The admission of this family proved a valuable lesson to the ashram. In the very beginning we proclaimed to the world that the ashram would not countenance untouchability. Those who wanted to help the ashram were thus put on their guard, and the work of the ashram in this direction was considerably simplified. The fact that it is mostly the real Orthodox Hindus who have met the daily growing expenses of the ashram is perhaps a clear indication that untouchability is shaken to its foundation. There are indeed many other proofs of this, but the fact that good Hindus do not scruple to help an ashram where we go the length of dining with the untouchables is no small proof. I am sorry that I should have to skip over quite a number of things pertaining to this subject. How we tackled delicate questions arising out of the main question, how we had to overcome some unexpected difficulties, and various other matters which are quite relevant to a description of experiments with truth. The chapters that follow will also suffer from the same drawback. I shall have to omit important details, because most of the characters in the drama are still alive, and it is not proper without permission to use their names in connection with events with which they are concerned. It is hardly practicable to obtain their consent or to get them every now and then to revise the chapters concerning themselves. Besides, such procedure is outside the limit of this autobiography. I therefore fear that the rest of the story, valuable as it in my opinion to seekers after truth, will be told with inevitable omissions. Nevertheless, it is my desire and hope, God willing, to bring this narrative down to the days of non-cooperation. Chapter 135. Abolition of indentured emigration. We shall, for a moment, take leave of the ashram, which in the very beginning had to weather internal and external storms, and briefly advert to a matter that engaged my attention. Indentured laborers were those who had emigrated from India to labor under an indenture for 5 years or less. Under the Gandhi settlement of 1914, the £3 tax in respect of the indentured emigrants to Natal had been abolished, but the general emigration from India still needed treatment. In March 1916, Pandit Madan Mohan Malaviyaji moved a resolution in the Imperial Legislative Council for the abolition of the indenture system. In accepting the motion, Lord Hardinge announced that he had obtained from His Majesty's government the promise of the abolition in due course of the system. I felt, however, that India could not be satisfied with so very vague an assurance, but ought to agitate for immediate abolition. India had tolerated the system through her sheer negligence, and I believed the time had come when people could successfully agitate for this redress. I met some of the leaders, wrote in the press, and saw that public opinion was solidly in favor of immediate abolition. Might this be a fit subject for satyagraha? I had no doubt that it was, but I did not know the modus operandi. In the meantime, the Viceroy had made no secret of the meaning of the eventual abolition, which, as he said, was abolition within such reasonable time as will allow of alternative arrangements introduced. So in February 1917, Pandit Malaviyaji asked for leave to introduce a bill for the immediate abolition of the system. Lord Chelmsford refused permission. It was time for me to tour the country for an all-India agitation. Before I started the agitation, I thought it proper to wait upon the Viceroy. So I applied for an interview. He immediately granted it. Mr. Maffei, now Sir John Maffei, was his private secretary. I came in close contact with him. I had a satisfactory talk with Lord Chelmsford who, without being definite, promised to be a helpful. I began my tour from Bombay. Mr. Jahangir Pati undertook to convene the meeting under the auspices of the Imperial Citizenship Association. The Executive Committee of the association met first for framing the resolutions to be moved at the meeting. Dr. Stanley Reed, SJT, now Sir Lalabai Samaldas, SJT, Natrajan and Mr. Pati were present at the committee meeting. The discussion centered round the fixing of the period within which the government was to be asked to abolish the system. There were three proposals, viz., for abolition as soon as possible, abolition by the July 31st, and immediate abolition. I was for a definite date, as we could then decide What to do if the government failed to accede to our request within the time limit? SJT Lullaby. The Congress. Babu Brajkishore Prasad moved the resolution expressing sympathy for the people of Champaran, and it was unanimously passed. Rajkumar Shukla was glad but far from satisfied. He wanted me personally to visit Champaran and witness the miseries of the riots there. I told him that I would include Champaran in the tour, which I had contemplated, and give it a day or two. "One day will be enough," said he, "and you will see things with your own eyes." From Lucknow I went to Kanpur. Rajkumar Shukla followed me there. Champaran is very near here. "Please give a day," he insisted. "Pray excuse me this time, but I promise that I will come," said I, further committing myself. I returned to the ashram. The ubiquitous Rajkumar was there too. "Pray fix the day now," he said. "Well," said I have to be in Calcutta on such and such a date. "Come and meet me then, and take me from there." I did not know where I was to go, what to do, what things to see. Before I reached Bhupen Babu's place in Calcutta, Rajkumar Shukla had gone and established himself there. Thus this ignorant, unsophisticated but resolute agriculturist captured me. So early in 1917, we left Calcutta for Champaran, looking just like fellow rustics. I did not even know the train. He took me to it and we traveled together, reaching Patna in the morning. This was my first visit to Patna. I had no friend or acquaintance with whom I could think of putting up. I had an idea that Rajkumar Shukla, simple agriculturist as he was, must have some influence in Patna. I had come to know him a little more on the journey, and on reaching Patna I had no illusions left concerning him. He was perfectly innocent of everything. The vakils that he had taken to be his friends were really nothing of the sort. Poor Rajkumar was more or less as a menial to them. Between such agriculturist clients and their vakils there is a gulf as wide as the Ganges in flood. Rajkumar Shukla took me to Rajendra Babu's place in Patna. Rajendra Babu had gone to Puri or some other place, I now forget which. There were 1 or 2 servants at the bungalow who paid us no attention. I had with me something to eat. I wanted dates, which my companion procured for me from the bazaar. There was strict untouchability in Bihar. I might not draw water at the well whilst the servants were using it, lest drops of water from my bucket might pollute them, the servants not knowing to what caste I belonged. Rajkumar directed me to the indoor latrine, the servant promptly directed me to the outdoor one. All this was far from surprising or irritating to me, for I was inured to such things. The servants were doing the duty which they thought Rajendra Babu would wish them to do. These entertaining experiences enhanced my regard for Rajkumar Shukla, if they also enabled me to know him better. I saw now that Rajkumar Shukla could not guide me, and that I must take the reins in my own hands. Chapter 137. The Gentle Bihari. I knew Maulana Mazharul Haq in London when he was studying for the bar, and when I met him at the Bombay Congress in 1915, the year in which he was president of the Muslim League, he had renewed the acquaintance and extended me an invitation to stay with him whenever I happened to go to Patna. I bethought myself of this invitation and sent him a note indicating the purpose of my visit. He immediately came in his car and pressed me to accept his hospitality. I thanked him and requested him to guide me to my destination by the first available train, the railway guide being useless to an utter stranger like me. He had a talk with Rajkumar Shukla and suggested that I should first go to Muzaffarpur. There was a train for that place the same evening, and he sent me off by it. Principal Kripalani was then in Muzaffarpur. I had known of him ever since my visit to Hyderabad. Dr. Koithram had told me of his great sacrifice, of his simple life, and of the ashram that Dr. Koithram was running out of funds provided by Professor Kripalani. He used to be a professor in the government college, Muzaffarpur, and had just resigned the post when I went there. I had sent a Telegram informing him of my arrival, and he met me at the station with a crowd of students. Though the train reached there at midnight, he had no rooms of his own and was staying with Professor Malkani, who therefore virtually became my host. It was an extraordinary thing in those days for a government professor to harbor a man like me. Professor Kripalani spoke to me about the desperate condition of Bihar, particularly of the Tirhut division, and gave me an idea of the difficulty of my task. He had established very close contact with the Biharis and had already spoken to them about the mission that took me to Bihar. In the morning, a small group of vakils called on me. I still remember Ramnavmi Prasad among them, as his earnestness specially appealed to me. "It is not possible," he said, "for you to do the kind of work you have come for if you stay here," meaning Professor Malkani's quarters. "You must come and stay with one of us. Gaya Babu is a well-known vakil here. I have come on his behalf and invite you to stay with him. I confess we are all afraid of government, but we shall render what help we can. Most of the things Rajkumar Shukla has told you are true. It is a pity our leaders are not here today. I have, however, wired to them. Both Bapu Brajkishore Prasad and Babu Rajendra Prasad. I expect them to arrive shortly, and they are sure to be able to give you all the information you want and to help you considerably. Pray come over to Gaya Babu's place." This was a request that I could not resist, though I hesitated for fear of embarrassing Gaya Babu. But he put me at ease, and so I went over to stay with him. He and his people showered all their affection on me. Rajkishore Babu now arrived from Darbhanga and Rajendra Babu from Puri. Rajkishore Babu was not the Babu Brajkishore Prasad I had met in Lucknow. He impressed me this time with his humility, simplicity, goodness, and extraordinary faith, so characteristic of the Biharis, and my heart was joyous over it. The Bihar vakil's regard for him was an agreeable surprise to me. Soon I felt myself becoming bound to this circle of friends in lifelong friendship. Rajkishore Babu acquainted me with the facts of the case. He used to be in the habit of taking up the cases of the poor tenants. There were 2 such cases pending when I went there. When he won any such case, he consoled himself that he did not charge fees from these simple peasants. Lawyers